this morning, our Way to a Wonderful Life message is titled, See Yourself as You Want to Be. See yourself as you want to be. And we're going to talk about a technique for visualization that was given to us by the mystical Ernest Holmes. And as we all understand, there is in the universe a spirit or intelligence that is self-knowing and a law that is not self-knowing but self-propelling, which obeys the spirit. We are self-knowing sinners and a law that has no volition other than to obey our impulses. We are ignorant of this and consequently bring upon ourselves through a direct act of the law all the experiences that we suffer. Should we completely change our mode of thinking, we would completely change our environment. We are today the sum total of all our thoughts and actions, the objectification of our subjective states of consciousness. Our subjective state of thought decides what is to happen to us objectively. Now, what Dr. Holmes is telling us is the same thing we learn in the Holy Scripture. As within, so without, and as a man thinketh, so is he. So we know that everything begins in mind, because mind is our connection to the great invisible intelligence and power and spirit that we call God, for lack of a better word. And we know that God, infinite spirit, infinite intelligence, infinite powers beyond anything the human mind can conceive, but we do know that there's a self-knowingness within us, just like there's a self-knowingness within the seed of corn that is planted in fertile soil that impulses it to open up and to grow through the dirt, grow through all things necessary to reach the sunshine to produce that healthy, vibrant stalk of corn that produces a multiplicity of ears of corn and multiple kernels of corn on each ear of corn. So we know that there's a self-knowing intelligence within everything, just as Jesus tells us to look at nature and to see it and see the evidence of it, but we must look within our own self, our own mind, our own heart, and our own soul, and recognize that that self-knowingness of God intelligence is within us too. So let's go back to the mystical Ernest Holmes. He says, our subjective state of thought is constantly radiating into universal mental law the images of our entire belief in life. And from these images of unconscious thought, these are things that we're not even aware of, spring all our outward conditions. The key then to success and happiness is the conscious control of thought and the continuous radiation of constructive thinking and acting. This key will unlock the treasure house of the infinite and reveal to us undreamed of opportunities and experiences. So when we think about that, we think that, how true that is, We go all the way back to the book of Job and the Old Testament of the Bible, where we read, that which I have greatly feared has come upon me. So we know that Job realized that his unconscious negative thoughts, his fears and doubts and worries had come upon him, that he had created within his own mind and heart and soul the very circumstances that he was to experience, that he was experiencing. So let's go back to Ernest Holmes. We have brought upon ourselves all our troubles through ignorance of the law, which of itself is always a law of liberty. In other words, we've been given this inherent volition to choose. The volition means that the ability to choose the good over the negative, but which we have misused through misunderstanding the true meaning of life. We're not ignorant people. We're intelligent beings, but sometimes we just miss the very basic and most simple things in life, especially those things that rule our experience, the environment around us. We must reverse the entire process of our thinking and learn to think of ourselves only in terms of spiritual valuation, which alone is enduring and real. Now, visualization means to create a mental picture of ourselves as we would like to be, to hand this picture over to the universal law of execution and to believe implicitly that it will act. But our present ability to visualize depends upon our present state of thought. It is limited to previous experiences and impressions. By the act of visualization, we can bring into our experience only that which we can mentally image, and we can image only that which we know. Perhaps this is why Solomon said, with all thy getting, get understanding. With all thy getting, get understanding. So understand that as within, so without, that as within, as we think of our physical health, our physical body will respond to that which we believe to be true for us. As we think about our finances and a level of wealth, a degree of wealth that we possess, that intelligence that responds to everything, just as gravity responds to our every physical activity, will respond and bring forth into our life experience that which we believe to be true for us. Now, Plantius said something to the effect that our work is always done better when we face spirit, even though our back is turned to our work. Emerson tells us that a betterment in conditions always follows the divine influx. Jesus tells us to seek the upper kingdom first, and that all things will be added. In other words, seek God in all things. Think about what God is doing, what God is desiring, what God is seeking to express through us, and then all things will be added unto us. All the great spiritual teachers have mentioned that we need to look for higher forms of thought if we wish to experience the better things. By visualization, we can only bring into our experience something we presently know about. We cannot reach beyond our mental grasp, nor can we jump away from our own shadow. It is necessary, then, to find higher visions and broader vistas of thought if we are to transcend our previous experiences. This can be done only by letting the higher mind rule by conscious contact with the greater reality. Visualization is always incomplete unless the thought is first impressed with the greater possibility and made receptive to the divine influx. Spirit is always ready to follow through our mentality, to flow through our mentality, I should say, but we are individuals and must let it flow by the act of our self-choice. In other words, we can block the good thoughts. We can block the more positive thoughts. We can block the images that see us as healthy and wealthy and prosperous and successful, loving and enjoying life. We can block those things from our mind. We always have choice. God has given us, through God's unconditional love for his offspring, or for its offspring, I should say, because God is neither male nor female. God is intelligence and power and spirit. So we are the offspring of the Most High God. In other words, we're the offspring of the highest intelligence, the highest power, and the infinite spirit that reigns supreme throughout the universe in which we live. But so many times we never see ourselves more than the physical human being that we are. So deep within our subjective mentality are imprinted the memories of previous experiences, Dr. Holmes tells us, hidden away in the inner recesses of thought. Generally unknown to us are the silent causes of our outward conditions. But the law is always acting, and we are ever perpetuating experiences that we no longer want to have. What we need is a new outlook upon life, a broader vision, a deeper realization. And this can come only from the Spirit that knows all things. And so this intelligence, which is God, is all-knowing intelligence. So we must tap into that all-knowing intelligence in our minds. The conscious use of law is for the purpose of neutralizing false images of thought and in their stead creating new ones. We must exchange or displace the human for the more nearly divine. We must learn to think as we feel God must think about us. So how do we think? What do we think God thinks about us? What do we think? You know, we're the offspring of intelligence and power and spirit. So when we think about ourselves, how do we think about ourselves? Do we see ourselves as intelligent? Do we see ourselves becoming aware of greater and greater ideas that bring a greater joy into our life? You know, not everybody wants money. Not everybody wants great success even. Some people just want to feel the peace of mind and the joy of living and enjoy the things that bring about that feeling in the heart that all is right with their world. So we must find in ourselves. We must learn to think as we feel God must think about us. We must learn to think as we feel God must think about us. So now we know that God is perfect and a complete unit. Consequently, if we would think as God thinks, we must do so from the basis of unity, the unity of good and the perfection of being. But we cannot think from the unity of good while we still believe in evil in any of its apparent forms, for clear thinking disavows evil and believes only in the good. Now we know that evil is just live spelled backwards. In other words, we can't live with negativity and feel good. We can't live with indebtedness and feel good. We can't live with illness and feel good. We can't live with any kind of dis-ease and feel good about ourselves. So we must disavow that evil, that which diminishes life, the livingness of life, and believe only in the good, and realize that everything that comes to us that seems to be an apparent evil is so temporary. It's just temporary. We just leave it behind us and move on into that greater feeling of God being with us, that God bringing forth to us that which brings us a greater joy and happiness and brings forth a greater peace in our life and brings forth something that makes us feel a greater enthusiasm for life. So it is useless, Dr. Holmes tells us, to visualize unless we bear this in mind. God is one, not two. Unity, then, must be the basis of all our thinking. Goodness must be paramount if we are to visualize correctly and effectively. So God is one, not two, just as we read in the book of Isaiah. I am the Lord, besides me there is no thing. Besides me there is nothing. So we must know that God is all there is, and so good is all there is. So when we see something that doesn't look good, we must look with a greater discernment, and we must think about what eyes of perception we are seeing that apparent evil through. So are we seeing it through the beliefs and the false ideas of the world, or are we believing that God is all there is, that God, intelligence, reigns supreme, and that anything unlike God, anything unlike the good, will be eliminated in our world, because everything that's not of God is temporary. It's temporary. We are to believe, then, that our thought operates through a field that is unconditioned and absolute, and if our thought is in alignment with reality, it will become powerful. This is more than holding thoughts and has nothing whatsoever to do with suggestion or mesmerism in any of its forms. God does not suggest, God knows. And God's knowledge is law, and this law is always perfect, always perfect, always perfect. So we want to perfect those things that concern us, then we must turn to God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind, and begin to love life, to love ourselves, and to love this world in which we live, knowing that God is the host, that we are the offspring of God, and God has hosted us, gifted us to live this wonderful life, So there is no power in holding thoughts, but there is power in knowing the truth, and that truth acts through the law. The will is not used in visualization, but the imagination is used. Divine imagination, we might say. The will enables us to imagine or image along the lines of our self-choice. Will holds out the mold. Imagination fills the concept with spiritual realization, and the law executes the deed. Now, right thinking straightens out our thought for the purpose of right perception. Right perception is God, and God is all. God operates by self-knowing, and the law acts by the impulse and the outpush of spirit intelligence. Just as we discussed earlier, that self-knowing is in that seed of corn that opens up and pushes through the dirt to get to the sunshine and get to whatever is necessary to grow that stalk of corn, just like that tiny seed that grows the oak tree. There's an intelligence, there's a self-knowingness within it. And as Jesus tells us, if we see this and we're aware of this in nature, then we must bring it back to our own mind and heart and soul and realize that this self-knowingness is inherent within us as well, Can you imagine that God favors the seed of corn or the seed of an oak tree over the human spirit, over the human race? I don't think so. So right thinking straightens out our thought for the purpose of right perception, and right perception is God, and God is all, and God operates by self-knowing. The law acts by the impulse and the outpush of spirit intelligence. That vision, which is based upon harmony and unity, can be complete and unconditioned. Spirit knows all things, and the law can do anything. By the conscious intelligence of the inner spirit, we set the law in motion for definite purposes. Any purpose that is constructive is legitimate and right, as spirit intelligence intends us to have and enjoy all things. So just as Jesus tells us, it is the Father's good pleasure to give to us, and Jesus tells us also that with God, all good things are possible. With God, all good things are possible. So we must feel and know and that back of our word, back of our thoughts, back of our images that we bring into our mind through our divine imagination, that there is a power that is greater than the apparent consciousness that sets it into motion. When we realize we must think in the absolute, perceive in the absolute, see in the absolute, and then let the law alone to execute itself. So what is this absolute? It's that all is God, all is good. All is God, all is good. Visualization from this standpoint is a creative act that is never bothered by any existing condition or conditions. It is absolute because it is backed by an immutable law and power. The law of God, the power of God, the intelligence of God. Once we are certain that our whole thought is harmonious and unified with good, we may ask for what we want, and it shall be done unto us by the law. Just as Jesus said, it is done unto us as we believe. So as we believe firmly and steadfastly in the good thing that we desire, it becomes ours. But it is dangerous to use this law unless we are absolutely certain of right visualization. For thoughts are things, and thoughts move in circles and will ultimately bring back to us exactly what we send out. We must each answer to ourselves, for ourselves, and all according to a perfect law. In other words, we don't want to be thinking about anything selfish, and we don't want to be thinking about ideas of competition or comparisons, or to outdo someone else, because all is God means everyone is God. So we want to be thinking only for what is not just for our personal good, but what is the good that brings forth a greater good to all those in the world in which we live, for all those in our own personal world in which we live. So in visualizing, we must put the past entirely behind us, distance ourselves from it, and do not think of the future either, but make our thought perceive the ever-present reality that God, intelligence, and power and spirit is right now, right where we are, and available to us. The Spirit of God knows no past and no future, and the law knows only to do. See yourself as you would like to be, but think of no person or persons in connection with your mental picture. Remember, everyone has the freedom of choice. So think of yourself as you would like to be and calmly state that you are now in the position that you care to be in, that you are now doing the things you would like to be doing, that you now possess the things you want to possess, and look at your picture as you would view a landscape, mentally dwelling on this picture that you created in your mind, trying to feel the reality of it. Until you can sense that it is a reality, then leave the entire picture for the law to work out for you, returning to your everyday affairs with perfect confidence that something is really taking place on the invisible side of life, which is always where every creative action occurs first, and that you will experience in material form, physical form, outward form, all of your inner aspirations, So we must allow ourselves to believe this intelligence within us that allows us to image, allows us to bring into our mind a thought of greater good, to know that this is God. We are created in the image likeness of God. We are the offspring of intelligence and power and spirit. So we must recognize and realize that in the knowing of this highest of all truth, that it's all God. All things are God. God expressing to the level and the degree that each and every one of us are aware that God is expressing through us. Now, some people don't have that awareness. And a lot of people give up because they just don't believe, because they've had so many things happen in their life that they've lost their belief that God is good, that God is all. But when we look out into our world and we recognize that everything that is unlike God, everything that negates the good of God, was only temporary and has been surpassed by a greater good, then we realize that this is the truth. This is the truth. So let go of everything. Clear your thought of every impression. Do not will or wish anything. In the silence of your own thought, feel that you are surrounded by an infinite spirit, that there is an inflow, an influx within your mind from the spirit, and that this inflow and this influx is drawing into your mind greater ideas, greater conceptions, greater images that bring forth a greater health, a greater happiness, a greater wealth, a greater prosperity, a greater success, and a greater creative action through your mind than you've ever experienced before. So let's look at this affirmation and think about these words. Think about these words as the truth for you right now. Infinite Spirit within me. Say this. Infinite Spirit within me. Say this out loud to yourself. Infinite Spirit within me, which is God, all-knowing, all-wise, all-perfect one. There is no life apart from you, God, and you are that which I am. I am whole because you are whole. I am perfect because you are perfect. I know because you know. I am because you are. My word is a law unto itself through the one great law of perfect liberty and perfect action. At this point, visualize your desire. Draw a complete picture of it in your thought and realize that it now is, right now, on the unseen side of life perhaps, but right now it is. So see yourself. See yourself as you want to be. And anything that comes into your mind that negates that vision you have of yourself as you want to be, reject it. Reject it. Because in this universe in which we live, the spirit intelligence that is self-knowing is always seeking to express through us the greater good. And once again, this is so simple, but it's something that Jesus was trying to impress upon the minds of the people he was teaching. If that self-knowing intelligence is within that little seed of corn, we know that that self-knowing intelligence is within our mind as well. And so each and every one of us can realize and actualize and materialize and manifest the good life, the joyful life, the abundant life, and the wonderful life. And so it is.